This is Top Fighter 2000 for the Sega Mega Drive, a bootleg fighting game or pirate or something featuring the finest assembly of an all-star cast of fighting game illuminaries, such as Ryu from Street Fighter, Ryo from Art of Fighting, Kyo from King of Fighters, Goku from Dragon Ball, Geese Howard from Fatal Fury, Cyclops from X-Men, Muhammad Ali, and Michael Jordan. Because sure, why not? If Shaq can have a fighting game, then why not MJ? Even if it is a pirate original. Released in 2000 XX by a company called X-Boy, I'll let you make up your own quips. Top Fighter 2000 is a one-on-one fighting game of the pirate variety that I first discovered watching a video from a YouTuber by the handle of Mike the Gamer Guy, who does a far better job of touching on these bootleg pirate aftermarket stuff, and is worth a watch or two if you're interested in that sort of thing. So for whatever reason, I was interested in sampling this game for myself, but because pirate originals are hard to come by around these parts, I had to resort to the evil art of emulation. And on top of that, the whole game's in Russian. Despite that, however, I think it shouldn't be much of a problem. It is a game at the end of the day. So Top Fighter is a fighting game where you pick one of 8 fighters, fight through the rest, and get a generic ending at the end of it all. You have a 1 or 2 player mode as well as options that let you set the difficulty, the number of rounds, and the time limit. And that's pretty much all there is to Top Fighter 2000, and that shouldn't be much of a surprise considering this is sort of black market material. Top Fighter 2000 is a 2-button fighter with only B and C being your punch and kick buttons, respectively. On the one hand, this makes for a fairly shallow gaming experience as your attacks options are fairly limited, but on the other hand, Top Fighter 2000 is one of those fighting games on the Mega Drive that does not require the 6-button controller, so that ought to be something. Here's the deal, Top Fighter 2000 is a game that lacks polish, and that's to be expected when coming across games of this ilk. Top Fighter 2000 is one of the more playable bootleg fighting games that I've come across, and that if you know the commands for the various special moves, you can pull them off with relative ease and they're fairly responsive, for the most part at least. There's a strange bug where if you hold down B, you're unable to move, and this ends up being something of a game breaker at times. And look, it's not slick, it's not perfect, it doesn't always work, and there's a fairly good chance you'll succumb to the rather inconsistent hit detection, but it is workable at best, and if nothing else, each of the 8 characters do have what can be charitably described as a rather full moveset of about 3 or 4 special moves and a super move that can be executed when your super meter is full. What you see is pretty much what you get with Top Fighter. You get 8 playable fighters, you get 8 opponents to fight at random, you get a generic ending, there's not much else to it really. There's 3 difficulty settings, which doesn't seem to do much so long as you spam them fireballs and stuff. And if you got a buddy with nothing better to do, you can play the 2-player mode and play out the battle between Muhammad Ali and Michael Jordan before your very eyes. Assuming you cared for that sort of thing, and I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't. There's not much I could say about the graphics side of things, because for the most part, Top Fighter 2000 comprises a good majority of graphical assets ripped from other games. Some of the source material seems obvious to those familiar with the material, Ryu's Street Fighter Alpha sprites, Geese Howard's Fatal Fury sprites, and so on and so forth. The sprites for Michael Jordan and Muhammad Ali are simply sprite edits from one of the King of Fighter games. Even the backgrounds are ripped from various games, mostly other fighting games. Then there's this one stage whose background was ripped from Dracula X on the Super Nintendo, which I find somewhat of an odd choice. At the very least though, all these ripped assets make for an overall decent presentation, the animation's somewhat spotty but everything blends in somewhat nicely together, and I do like that opening introduction. That's rather nicely done. Though, points have to be taken for that one scene where Ali is punching a basketball player. That is clearly not Michael Jordan, even though MJ appears in a late... never mind. In terms of sound, well, Top Fighter 2000 does have some unique music tracks in the background and they seem somewhat original. Then again, maybe not. For some reason, Ryu's stage is a weird variation of the Power Rangers theme playing in the background, and that's about the only song that I really recognize. I don't know if the rest of the tunes are ripped or just inspired by stuff from other games, but one way or another they're kinda bland. Not great, not bad, just kinda sorta there. Sound effects are also just there, and there's some voice bites which are somewhat decent quality, but that's about it. And this is where I get stumped, because on the one hand, Top Fighter 2000 is not a particularly good fighting game. The controls are rather limited and somewhat buggy. The hit detection is somewhat shoddy, pulling off special moves is a 50-50 proposition, and the AI is somewhat questionable at times. But on the other hand, even with all its faults, Top Fighter 2000 is somewhat playable. It has a decent cast of characters with a moderate set of moves. The focus on Ali and MJ being major players is a somewhat intriguing selling point. The presentation is adequate, and perhaps most importantly of all, the game has never crashed on me, and that's an important point. Finding an actual cartridge of Top Fighter 2000 is a difficult and undoubtedly costly venture, so if you happen to come across some interest in giving this game a shot, your best bet will likely be through emulation. Ultimately, Top Fighter 2000 or Top Fighter 2005 or Mortal Kombat 8 or something, whatever it's called, is more of an oddity, a curiosity piece that needs to be played with somewhat of an open mind. This is never going to be on par with your Street Fighter 2s or your Eternal Champions, or insert popular, good quality fighting game on the Genesis, Mega Drive, whatever. But as far as pirate original fighting games are concerned, I've played much worse, and Top Fighter 2000, while lacking polish, is intriguing, and that has to count for something. I don't know what, but just, yeah. Anyways, later.